Daily Harvest delivers carefully sourced, chef-crafted food built on fruits and vegetables. You can choose from more than 50 ready-to-blend smoothies, savory harvest bowls, soups, and breakfast bowls. Each single-serving cup comes ready to blend or heat. Just add water or milk to a smoothie or heat up a harvest bowl. Daily Harvest is the easiest, fastest, and most delicious way to load up on fruits and vegetables. And to make a healthy eating habit finally stick, just go to daily-harvest.com and use the promo code Zodiac to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's daily-harvest.com. Promo code Zodiac.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast author or individuals participating in the podcast and do not necessarily represent those of iHeartMedia, How Stuff Works, or its employees.
After the attack at Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac fell silent. There were no more letters, there were no more phone calls after that initial phone call to the Napa Police Department. And we don't know why, but 2 weeks after the attack at Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac resurfaced in San Francisco. And while he had already sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle establishing himself as a link to San Francisco, he hadn't committed any crimes there that we knew of.
In the newsroom, our ears perked up, obviously, a little more about this kind of case. Now you've got 3 cases, and one guy claiming responsibility and providing in some of these letters details that only the police would know, so they'd verify that he was at the actual scene. But it wasn't until October 11th, 1969, when Zodiac first struck in San Francisco, that I think the Chronicle went into full-on serial killer mode, if you will, for a couple of reasons. One is, in this case, Zodiac hailed a taxi in front of the current theater on Geary Street in San Francisco. He asked to be taken out to a fairly upscale neighborhood called Presidio Heights, where he instructed the driver to stop. And once he stopped, he asked him to go another block for reasons no one's ever figured out. And when they got to the next corner, Zodiac shot the guy in the back of the head and killed him. And this cab driver's name was Paul Stine.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them, leaving them for dead.
Subject stated, I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. I did it.
A man who wore a medieval-style executioner's hood, carried a knife and gun, and intended to use them.
They haven't arrested me because they can't prove a thing. I'm not the damn Zodiac.
Who is the Zodiac, and where is he?
From iHeartRadio, How Stuff Works, and Tenderfoot TV, this is Monster, the Zodiac Killer. Taxi drivers are the unspoken experts of their cities, the unofficial tour guides, per se. In a big city like San Francisco, taxi drivers are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're a constant, a given. And because of this, they were also an easy target for the Zodiac. Think about it. There are few people more trusting of strangers than a taxi driver. They pull over, pick you up, drop you off. Sometimes you never even see their face or exchange names. There's intimacy. Here you are, sharing this small place with a stranger. Do you really know who's in the car with you? The Zodiac didn't stalk his victims for weeks. He chose them at random because of their environment, their unawareness, and in some cases, their occupation. What's more frightening than someone who preys on the unexpected?
San Francisco is directly linked to the Zodiac Killer. There's no escaping it, which is ironic because it's not where he started. He started in Vallejo and Benicia.
This is Zodiac expert Michael Butterfield.
And maybe that was something that he wanted. Maybe he lived in San Francisco. Maybe it was easier to write to the San Francisco Chronicle and make sure that he could read that newspaper than it was to drive all the way to wherever he had to go to get a Vallejo Times-Herald. I don't know. One thing that we know for sure is that the Zodiac wanted the attention that he wanted when he wanted it. And what he wanted in July of 1969 was for as many people to see this as possible, to get as much attention as possible, and to cement his image as a real threat. And it worked. And then after that, I think one of the things that he started to realize was, I'm going to do better if I keep going to the Chronicle than if I keep going to another newspaper. And there's some evidence that the Vallejo Times-Herald was not as willing to keep playing this game with him. Maybe he sensed that. Maybe when he was looking at their coverage, he didn't like what he saw. So after that, he started focusing on the San Francisco Chronicle, and they were happy to play along.
Well, the key papers in San Francisco were the Chronicle and the Examiner. They were very different. At the end of the day, the Examiner was a kind of symbolic power, but it was losing its circulation war with the San Francisco Chronicle.
Here's Peter Richardson, historian and lecturer at San Francisco State University.
The Chronicle was never a great paper journalistically, but they had some very interesting columnists. It was kind of a fun read for that reason. But the city had never really distinguished itself journalistically. It didn't have a paper during this time like the Los Angeles Times, much less the Washington Post or the New York Times. They were widely read, but they were not any great shakes.
Despite this, the San Francisco Chronicle had the highest readership in the Bay Area, and Peter Richardson says that this was the only thing that mattered to the Zodiac.
The psychotic killer has already murdered 5. 1 at a lover's lane near a lake just north of San Francisco. 3 others in nearby Vallejo. The latest, a taxi driver in San Francisco.
He apparently was in the area of Mason and Geary in San Francisco and hailed a cab. And that cab was being driven by Paul Stine, who was a student and a husband. The plan was to direct Paul Stine to the intersection of Washington and Maple, which was in an upscale neighborhood of San Francisco known as Presidio Heights. So, from what we know, Paul Stine took the passenger to that location. What we don't know is why the cab eventually ended up 1 block further west at Washington and Cherry Streets. Some kids were in a house across the street, and they heard some kind of commotion and looked out the window. And they saw a man in the front seat doing something to the cab driver. They thought that he was stabbing him or doing something to him. And they watched as the man handled the driver, and then they called the police. And apparently, while they were talking to the police dispatcher and they were describing what they were seeing, something went wrong. Instead of describing the killer as a white man, the radio dispatch to responding officers described the killer as a black man. The witnesses watched as the man finished whatever he was doing in the cab. He got out of the cab, he walked around to the driver's side and appeared to have some sort of light-colored cloth in his hand as he was wiping down the cab or doing something on the driver's side of the cab. He then turned and walked north up Cherry Street.
2 days later, the Chronicle received a letter, and only the Chronicle, from the Zodiac.
This is former reporter Duffy Jennings. He was there when the San Francisco Chronicle received this now infamous letter.
As the woman opened it in the editorial department, a piece of bloody shirt fell out with the letter.
This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street and Maple Street last night. To prove this, here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt. I am the same man who did in the people in the North Bay Area.
So they knew that this was Paul Stine's killer. And now he's, again, taunting police to catch him. And the fear factor went way up. That now he's in San Francisco.
Captain Lee, at this particular time, is satisfied that the individual who sent this piece of shirt in and the letter to the Chronicle was in fact connected with is the person who killed the cab driver, let me put it that way.
Based on what?
The contents of the letters, the language of the letters, in other cases are very similar to the language and the form of the letters in this particular case. And because of the fact that the shirt matches the shirt as I understand it, we would have to assume that there is validity to the claim of this individual.
That was San Francisco Police Chief Thomas Cahill. The SFPD confirmed the killer was in fact the Zodiac. They knew this because the striped cloth found in the letter matched the striped shirt Paul Stine was wearing. And when investigators checked Paul Stine's shirt, they found that a rectangular portion was missing. With the San Francisco Police Department involved, this crime now crossed over multiple cities and jurisdictions. And those individual departments weren't necessarily working together. In Napa, where the last murder occurred at Lake Berryessa, sheriffs had made their own assessment of the murder in San Francisco.
Well, preliminary tests of certain evidence, such as fingerprints and handwriting, have been made to where we are certain that the man that we're looking for is the same man responsible for the killing of the cab driver in San Francisco, plus the shooting deaths in Solano County in Vallejo.
Well, Sheriff, what type of person is this man?
Well, we have reason to believe that he's a maniac. However, he is a cunning man. He knows just exactly what moves he's going to make. He knows where he's going to be from 1 minute to the next. He knows where he's going to start and when he's going to end. He plans these things out, and he knows just exactly how this thing is going to turn out. We think it appears to us that he is killing just for the thrill of killing.
So how did the killer avoid the police in Presidio Heights? In the bloody shirt letter, the Zodiac gave his own account of what happened that night.
The San Francisco police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly, instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, seeing who could make the most noise. The car drivers should have just parked their cars and sat there quietly, waiting for me to come out of cover.
But there was more. In another letter, sent just a few weeks later, Zodiac gave even more details about what happened after Paul Stine's murder.
If you wonder why I was wiping the cab down, I was leaving fake clues for the police to run all over town with. As one might say, I gave the cops some busy work to do to keep them happy. I enjoy needling the blue pigs. Hey, blue pig, I was in the park. You were using fire trucks to mask the sound of your cruising prowl cars. The dogs never came within 2 blocks of me, and they were to the west. And there was only 2 groups of parking, about 10 minutes apart, and then the motorcycles went by, about 150 feet away, going from south to northwest. P.S. 2 cops pulled a goof about 3 minutes after I left the cab. I was walking down the hill to the park when this cop car pulled up, and one of them called me over and asked if I saw anyone acting suspicious or strange in the last 5 to 10 minutes. And I said yes. There was this man who was running by waving a gun, and the cops peeled rubber and went around the corner as I directed them, and I disappeared into the park a block and a half away, never to be seen again.
You probably don't realize it, but the average American blasts their eyes with bright screens for 11 hours every day. I'm pretty sure that I'm also one of those people. Checking my phone, editing podcasts, watching movies, you name it. The fact is, you can't stop looking at screens. But you can protect your eyes with a new pair of Felix Gray glasses, available with or without a prescription. Felix Gray glasses are a lifesaver for me. They filter out 90% of high-energy blue light and eliminate all the glare coming off screens, so I can live my life without tired, dry eyes, blurry vision, or headaches. Unlike other blue light filtering glasses, Felix Grays have no yellow lens tint, so you can see everything in its true color. Not to mention, they look cool. Felix Gray glasses are handcrafted from high-quality materials, like organic Italian acetate and premium German steel, and they have tons of great styles that can make you look pretty put together. Personally, my favorite pair is the Roebling design. Felix Gray glasses are available in non-prescription, prescription, and readers. They also have free shipping and free returns, so there's nothing to lose. Don't go another day staring at screens without the help of Felix Gray glasses. Go to felixgrayglasses.com/Zodiac to protect your eyes today. That's felixgrayglasses.com/Zodiac. felixgrayglasses.com/Zodiac.
Paul Stine, unlike the other victims, became a victim because of his job. That seems very unfair to me, and I know that's an odd way to describe it, but he didn't have a chance. He had no idea. He was just doing what he thought he was supposed to do. He thought he would take this person where he wants to go and go on his way. He didn't know that the passenger he picked up had other plans.
This is Michael Butterfield again. He's interviewed numerous people who were on the scene that night.
And while the kids were watching, the first responding police officers arrived. And that was Frank Pita and Armand Pellicetti. And Armand Pellicetti told me in several interviews I did with him over the years that he arrived at the scene, he saw the kids coming out of the house, he directed them to stand back, he asked his partner to watch the area to guard the crime scene, and he approached the cab with a flashlight. He said that when he got near the driver's side, he could see some sort of impression on the outer door that appeared to be blood and maybe fingerprints. He then looked inside the cab, and he saw Paul Stine's body laying in the driver's seat. And according to Armand Pellicetti, it was obvious that he was dead. Pellicetti then walked north on Cherry Street in pursuit of the killer. And at some point, he encountered two other police officers who were responding, Officers Don Falk and Eric Zelms. At some point, the description of the killer was corrected to that of a white man.
According to the new witness description, the killer was a white male in his early 40s. He was about 5'8" with a heavy build. He had reddish blonde hair, a crew cut, and he wore eyeglasses and a dark parka jacket.
And when that happened, apparently Don Falk realized that that was a man that they had driven past on their way to the crime scene. So Falk and his partner turned around and went back and went looking for the killer. They did not find him. Pellicetti kept walking and didn't see anything. By that time, then the fire department and other investigators were arriving. They did find some fingerprints in that area where Armand Pellicetti thought he had seen some fingerprints. And those prints were found in the exact area where the killer was last seen making contact with the cab. According to the witnesses, no one touched that cab in between the time that the killer walked away and Armand Pellicetti arrived. So that's a strong indication that those fingerprints did belong to the killer.
I had a lot of questions about the murder of Paul Stine. Why would the killer change his MO so dramatically again? The Zodiac had previously focused on young couples in isolated areas, and his weapon of choice was a handgun. He escalated his attacks when he wore a costume, then tied up and stabbed the couple at Lake Berryessa. This time, he went back to his regular clothes and back to his gun to kill a lone male cab driver. It just didn't make sense to me. To better understand, I first wanted to retrace the Zodiac's steps that night, to take the same route in the back of a taxi. So I started where he did, near the intersection of Mason and Geary in the Tenderloin district. There's a theater nearby that the Zodiac may have gone into.
My name is Oliver Sutton. I am head of security for the ACT Theater for more than 20 years. I've known this area virtually all the time I've lived in San Francisco. The Zodiac, the first murder to take place in San Francisco. A patron came out of the ACT Theater. At that time, it was the Geary and the ACT American Conservatory Theater. I don't know what show was going on at that time, but he could have just gone into the lobby, used that as a backdrop, or he could actually have been a patron of ACT that came out, hailed a taxi, and murdered him. I'll take you into the lobby, turn the lights on, and give you a chance to see where it took place. Okay. This is the actual lobby of the, let me turn the lights on. So, the killer, he would have come through these double doors. They filmed it that way for the movie, that he walked out of these double doors and hailed down a yellow taxi, a yellow cab. He, being a hack in any city is tough because you don't know who's getting in the back seat of your car. According to the story, the victim was not chosen. It was just a random victim. Crime of opportunity.
From there, the killer called a taxi and was picked up by Paul Stine, so I called a cab too. I asked to be taken to the corner of Washington and Cherry Street in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. It was about 3 miles west, 15 minutes by car. And oddly enough, my cab driver's name was also Paul.
Senator, she lives over there. Diane Feinstein.
Feinstein? Really?
Yeah, she lives over in that area.
Paul and I got to talking. He had heard about the Zodiac case, but didn't know much of the details. He asked me how many people the Zodiac had killed. I told him how many the police had confirmed. He wasn't impressed.
He's small time.
I know, and
he's small potatoes.
He shot a ton of people. The reason why it's such a big deal is because he was constantly writing to the Chronicle.
And of course, he was one of the first one. I mean, you know.
He was one of the first, and he was in the paper.
So, when he did something, he made sure that the police knew it was him that did it, right?
Yeah, he would send
He wanted them to really claim, I did that one.
Yes.
I don't want nobody else to try to claim it as their glory.
Well,
this is me. I did it.
Well, here's where it gets crazy, though, man, because he, like, in the beginning, like with that one, Paul Stine,
yeah,
he sent a piece of the guy's cloth with his blood on it in his letter to the Chronicle, right?
And it was a cab driver, right?
It was a cab driver, yeah. Named Paul.
Guess my name's Paul. I even got that spooky, man.
Right?
I got bumps. I got goosebumps on me. You're not related to the Zodiac, are you?
When we arrived on the scene of Paul Stine's final moments, I got out and just listened for a while. A few cars drove by, but there wasn't much, if any, foot traffic. It felt like a different universe from the bustling city that was just a few blocks away. That's when I realized the Zodiac sought out these types of locations. Quiet, unassuming areas. Places that seem almost peaceful, miles away from anywhere you might consider dangerous. A country road, a public park, and a popular vacation spot on a lake. In this case, a beautiful upscale neighborhood in San Francisco. It made me wonder, did Zodiac want to strip away the feeling of safety from these places? And as I'm standing there lost in this thought, I see a man walking towards me. He's carrying some takeout. He asked me what I was doing, and we got to talking. The man requested we not use his name, and we altered his voice for privacy. Because it turns out, he was related to someone who witnessed Paul Stine's murder.
So it was my father, who was actually since passed. He was just a kid. He was a kid and he was just playing downstairs and he just, looked outside the window and saw a yellow cab and kids being kids there, nosy, and they looked in and I guess, from my memory of what I was told, saw someone slouch over in the car who, come to find it was a culprit of the Zodiac, and you called the police. And his family, or his mom and dad, were down the street at a party, and, they called him, he was crazy, I think someone just got murdered. Police came, and that's what they came to find. And he's been hassled, by every investigator since, trying to solve it, but I don't think they ever found him. He didn't like talking about it that much, but I think it was either from that window there, the first floor, or it was from the third floor. Pretty sure it was from the first floor, but I think he did feel some sort of weight of responsibility of, give accurate information to help solve this crime. He was young, I think he was only 12.
This episode of Monster is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. You know what's not smart? Job boards that make you wait for the right person to apply for your job. But you know what is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/Zodiac to hire the right person. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter finds qualified candidates for you. Its powerful matching technology scans thousands of resumes to identify people with the right skills, education, and experience, and actively invites them to apply to your job, so you get qualified candidates fast. That's why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. This rating comes from hiring sites on Trustpilot with over 1,000 reviews. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/Zodiac. If you love this show, show your support to it and ZipRecruiter by going to ziprecruiter.com/ZODIAC. That's ziprecruiter.com/Zodiac. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
The Zodiac's move to San Francisco meant there would be a lot of changes in the investigation. One of them was that was the first time he had struck in a major metropolitan city, which meant that a major metropolitan police force would be assigned to the case. Two of the investigators assigned to the case who arrived at the crime scene that night were David Toschi and Bill Armstrong. Dave Toschi was sort of known as a celebrity cop. He liked media attention. People who lived in San Francisco were accustomed to seeing his name in the newspaper or his face on television. And when the Zodiac crime started, that just naturally increased because now he was in charge of the hunt for the biggest serial killer in California history. He was identified primarily as the Zodiac cop. In the movie Bullet, Steve McQueen supposedly based a lot of his character on Dave Toschi, including the way he held his gun and things like that. And there's also stories that the movie Dirty Harry was inspired by the battle between Toschi and the Zodiac.
There's a madman loose. Give the message to the Chronicle. We'll agree to pay. We'll tell him we need time to get the money together.
Wait a minute, do I get this right? You're gonna play this creeps game?
It'll get us some more breathing space.
So it might get somebody killed.
Toschi and Armstrong investigated the scene, and at a certain point, those fingerprints were discovered. There was also a pair of gloves that were found underneath one of the seats, I believe, as well as a shell casing that appeared to have come from the Zodiac's weapon.
The bullet came from a 9mm pistol, but it was not the same 9mm used to kill Darlene Ferrin. Toschi and Armstrong would also discover that the gloves belonged to a previous customer of Paul Stine.
All of this evidence was gathered, the witness statements were taken, and a composite sketch of the killer was drawn up with the assistance of these witnesses. Toschi and Armstrong at the time thought that they were investigating what you might call a routine robbery. It was not unusual for cab drivers to be robbed or even shot in San Francisco. So when they were investigating those first 2 days, they thought they were looking for a career criminal, somebody with a record who probably committed this kind of crime before, and someone who could be readily identified by searching through the pool of usual suspects. They had no idea that in 2 days, the San Francisco Chronicle would receive a letter from the Zodiac taking responsibility for the murder of Paul Stine, which also included a piece of Paul Stine's shirt to remove any and all doubt that he was actually responsible.
Since the release of the latest letter yesterday, our office has received additional phone calls from persons in the Bay Area who feel that they can be helpful in the apprehension of the Zodiac suspect.
This is Inspector David Toschi speaking with KPIX News in 1969.
My partner, Inspector Armstrong, and I, who are handling the case, have received several phone calls this morning and this afternoon on various informants who have given us some information as to names, addresses, and locations that we have checked out and are checking out at the present time. It's generally stirred up quite a bit of interest.
This, of course, changed the entire investigation. Toschi and Armstrong thought it was a simple crime, and now they were involved in what was possibly the most explosive manhunt in California history. So obviously, moving to San Francisco, changing his victim preference, acting out in a much different kind of crime, sending scraps of victims' clothing in the mail, this was all a new level, a next step for the Zodiac. It was much more terrifying than where it was before. But also, it sort of began this feud between the San Francisco Police Department and the Zodiac. Part of that seems to have come from the fact that the Zodiac did escape the police that night, and if he did remain in the area and watch them searching for him and watching them fail, that must have done a lot for his ego. He must have felt very powerful. He must have felt invincible.
But this was just the beginning of the San Francisco chapter. In the last part of the Bloody Shirt letter, Zodiac had one more threat.
School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kitties as they come bouncing out. Signed, Zodiac.
School children are nice targets. I shall wipe out a school bus some morning, shoot out the tires, and then pick off the kiddies as they come bounding out. That was the threat of the Zodiac killer. Now, every day, police cars follow the buses which would be likely targets. Officers armed with shotguns take the threat seriously.
I think that was the thing that ratcheted up the paranoia and the fear around this Zodiac guy, who by now was, a mythical figure of a hulking guy walking around the streets who could not just kill a couple kids at a lover's lane, but anybody could be the next victim.
Next time on Monster, the Zodiac Killer.
We have a number of plainclothes officers following buses in the morning and in the evening.
I remember as a kid having a cop car follow behind us, and I remember that because as kids we would all kind of run to the back of the bus and wave at the cop.
The media frenzy that resulted, predictable as it was a huge part of the story itself. So in some ways we start to see the media become a player in the stories that they're covering.
It was just a sense of not knowing what would happen next, especially after these letters start coming, threatening to sort of escalate the violence, and people not knowing whether that was serious or not.
You're not afraid?
No, I'm not. No, not too afraid.
That wasn't enough for him. Then he moved on to the next level, where he started threatening to blow up a school bus full of children.
The death machine is already made.
Monster, the Zodiac Killer, is a 15-episode podcast produced by iHeartRadio, How Stuff Works, and Tenderfoot TV. Donald Albright and I are executive producers on behalf of Tenderfoot TV, alongside producers Meredith Stedman, Mason Lindsay, and Christina Dana. Jason Hoke is executive producer on behalf of How Stuff Works, along with producers Trevor Young, Miranda Hawkins, Ben Kubrick, and Josh Thane. Scott Benjamin provides additional voice talent. Matt Frederick is our host. Original music is by Makeup and Vanity Set. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the first season of Monster, called Atlanta Monster, about the Atlanta child murders from the late 70s to the early 80s. Download the 10-episode season right now. Have questions or comments? Email us at monster@howstuffworks.com, or you can call us at 1-833-285-6667. Thanks for listening.
I'm Katie Golden. I studied psychology and evolutionary biology at Harvard, and I pretend to be a bird on Twitter. In my new podcast, Creature Feature, we view nature and man from a new perspective. Each episode asking a comedian to get inside the minds of animals so we can explore the startling connections to human psychology. You'll find bloodbaths and treachery that make Game of Thrones seem like a dumb show for babies. Join us every Wednesday and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you listen to podcasts.